Hello everyone, and welcome to Korean Cinema Today. Here in Seoul, this is Piers Conran, and we'll be talking about the latest in Korean film. Korean Cinema Today is the new podcast from the Korean Film Council. You can find us online at koreanfilm.or.kr. Our website is known as KoBiz, Korean Film Biz Zone. If you go there, you will find the latest news on Korean film, as well as various interesting features and interviews and reviews and such on Korean films. You will also find the webzine, which is also named Korean Cinema Today. You will have the opportunity to subscribe to our newsletter and, of course, tune in again to this podcast. If you would like to find us on iTunes, just type out the name in the search bar and the podcast Korean Cinema Today will pop up. Be sure to join the discussion of Korean film on social media. At Twitter, our Twitter handle is at Korean Film Biz, that's B-I-Z, or to engage with us on our Facebook page, that's facebook.com/kobiz.kofic, that's KOBIZ.KOFIC. Here in Seoul, this is Piers Conran, your host, and I am a journalist for the Korean Film Council, as well as the Korea correspondent for twitchfilm.com, an international film site, and the founder and editor of Korean film blog modernkoreancinema.com. I'm also these days a consultant for the Fribourg International Film Festival, helping them select a few Korean films. Today we will have the great pleasure of welcoming Simon McEnteggart, the founder of hangukyeonghwa.com, a fellow film critic here in Korea. So we'll have a great pleasure. It'll be a great pleasure to talk with him in just a little while. But first, let's have a look at the news. The Jeonju International Film Festival, going into its 15th edition, is just around the corner. It'll be getting started on May 1st, but we've already gotten a quick look at the competition films, or the Korean competition films, rather. There will be 11 films this year, all of them features, and among those, these were all new films for the most part from first-time directors. One of them is A Dream of Iron from the Berlin International Film Festival. That one already screened at the forum section there. Director Kelvin Pak Kyung-kun won the NetPak Award. He shared it with the documentary Nonfiction Diary, also a Korean film. And that will be having its Korean premiere during Jeonju. Beyond that, there's a few other films such as You Are My Vampire, a new genre film from Lee Won-hye, and Jung Byung-sik's Monkeys, or Lee Kyung-seop's The Catcher, or the new horror film Yoo Young-sun's The Wicked. So 11 films there will be competing in Jeonju, and more films will be announced later when the full program is unveiled on April 1st. The Korean Film Council recently released the report for February for the total box office of the month, and total attendance was at 18.54 million admissions, which was a 15% decrease from last year. And revenue was also down 12.2% to $138.7 million. The big films that did well in February were the same hits from January. Those included the Lunar New Year release Miss Granny and Disney's hit animation Frozen, which surpassed the 10 million admissions mark, becoming the first animation to do so in Korean cinema history. And the market share for Korean films during the month was just over half at 53.4%, and that represented 9.9 million admissions, with revenue reaching $71.6 million. Of the top 10 box office titles, 7 of those were Korean, with Miss Granny leading on top. The film is currently just over 8 million admissions. And other titles were also on the list but did not do so well, such as Man in Love, another film from the Lunar New Year, with just under 1 million admissions there during the month, as well as the new CJ entertainment thriller Tabloid Truth, 850,000 roughly, and the kind of Korean-style Sex and the City film Venus Talk, with just under 700,000 admissions. Next up, our interview with film critic Simon McEnteggart. Today we have the great pleasure of welcoming Simon McEnteggart into the studio, the founder of a Korean film website, hangukyeonghwa.com, and also an occasional freelance writer for the Korean Film Council. Simon, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you very much for inviting me. It's great to be here.
So, Simon, you're obviously a big fan of Korean cinema.
Absolutely.
You started a blog on that, which has now become a website. And so, could you tell us, how did you become such a fan of the national industry?
Wow, that's a big question. But when I was in England, I was studying film and cultural theory, and I was introduced to Korean film through a module called Asian cinema, which interesting title because Asian cinema is so big, it's a whole continent. So I didn't get much of a chance to see Korean film, but the small piece that I did get to see, I was hooked. I thought it was amazing. And then I started looking for more Korean films, but in England, they're sold in a particular way through the Asia Extreme DVD line. So it was mostly the extreme movies, but luckily I did get introduced to Kim Ji-yoon and Park Chan-wook and sort of various directors like that. And then I became a sort of a lecturer at university as well, and my thirst for Korean films grew from there. Went to a few film festivals that were dedicated to Asian cinema. But there just came a point in England where I just thought that my life isn't going anywhere in the film industry. So I figured I love Korean films. I think I'll go to the country. And it was as simple as that, really. So I came to Korea, started to get really knee-deep into all of the releases, not just films considered extreme. And I realized that it's such a vibrant industry with so much to say, and it's so much more interesting than my own home country. So after a couple of years of getting really so much enjoyment out of films, I decided to start a blog, which then went on to become a website, and here I am today. So yeah, Korean films have led me through the course of my life, really.
It's
interesting.
Good. I can identify with that quite strongly. So how long have you been in Korea at this point?
4 years.
4 years, okay.
Yeah, 4 years, but unfortunately still can't speak fluently yet. I'm trying, getting there, but it's tough.
It's an incredibly hard language. I really hope I'll be fluent someday. But, it'll be a long time coming.
Yeah.
So you run your website 한국영화.com. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Sure. Yeah, I created the website, and what I tend to do is watch films and then write some reviews on them. If there's a festival coming up, I'll start doing a profile of the films that are in competition, specifically the Korean films, which ones are interesting and what ones to look out for. I sometimes review older films, get those reviews on, and just to sort of revisit some classics from the past. But a lot of the stuff I tend to do these days is festival work, particularly the independent arena. So I try to focus on giving independent films a bit of a bigger voice, if possible. And recently, Darcy Paquette has released the Wildflower Awards for independent films, which is wonderful. So that's building sort of upon this independent realm. So that's generally my focus. I try to do some big releases, but it's mostly festivals and independent.
Okay. So then you were a fan of Korean films before starting a website, and now the website has grown quite a bit. Has the website itself changed the way you view Korean films?
It has, yes. Because I studied film theory and criticism in university, and then I just started to enjoy films just as an audience member, really. But with writing critically about Korean film, I've started to think about society, culture, history, gender studies. So I've started to write these reviews in a much more critical sense. But I've tried to make the reviews as accessible as possible for sort of everyday sort of people who aren't as familiar with these theories. But yeah, it's given me a much deeper appreciation for Korea as a country and the history and culture. So I'm so glad I started it. It's definitely made my mind much more broad in scope, more enlightened, I guess.
Very good. So then you go to a lot of festivals, and Korea, of course, has many film festivals. Which are among your favorite?
Yeah, there's so many. I actually discovered one last week that I didn't even know existed.
Was this the Agape Film Festival?
Yes.
I hadn't heard of it. What is that?
I've never heard of that word in English. I had to look in a dictionary to learn that word. Apparently, it's like romance, or along the lines of romance and relationships.
Okay.
And it's in its 8th or 9th edition.
That's incredible.
And I had no idea. There are so many film festivals. But yeah, the wonderful thing about having so many is they all have their own unique identity, and I love that. Like if you go to Jeonju or Busan or Jecheon, they each feel so different, and it's really hard to pick a favorite. Because Jeonju, you've got these wonderful independents coming out. Busan, there's this spectacle and these big A-listers. And there's something like Jecheon, you're in the countryside with this beautiful lake, getting a live orchestra playing these classic movies. So it's really, really hard to pick a favourite. I did enjoy Seoul Women's Film Festival. I do have a background in feminist studies, so I really enjoyed that festival. But I think... wow, it's really hard to pick one. I think I'd have to go with Busan.
Busan?
Just because of the scale of
the
it.
sheer size of it.
Yeah, it's just... it's wonderful. I feel overwhelmed every time, like a kid in a candy
store. As do I. It's an enormous event, and kind of a... it just kind of comes over you.
It does, and the weather and the beaches and the events that are laid on. It's such a great festival. It's hard to top that.
Yeah, it's a huge one. It's getting bigger every year.
Yes, I don't know how they managed to do that.
The Cannes of Asia. We'll see if that happens. Since you've began your interest in Korean films, have you noticed any great change in the kind of films that the industry is offering?
Absolutely. Yeah, there are some big changes over the past few years. In terms of mainstream, I have noticed a shift towards more commercial, less risque, shall we say, filmmaking, which is a real shame. That's one of the wonderful things about Korean film, is this risk-taking by directors, showing these themes and these difficult issues. But I think a lot of business people have cottoned on. They've realised, this is a big money-making business. They've started to make more commercial, like romance films that will play well in the Philippines and Thailand. So it's very hard for commercial films these days, I think, to have that edginess that Bong Joon-ho and Park Chan-wook were doing sort of 5-10 years ago. But on the flip side of that, the independent films seem to have just taken off. They are doing a lot more interesting subject matter. Well, I suppose interesting is the wrong word. More dynamic, more controversial subject matter, whether it's political, like Namyeongdong 1985. What was that?
National Security.
National Security, that's it. Or Cheonan Ship, Project Cheonan Ship, talking about the sinking of the ship before. Quite controversial. There's also a lot of films that deal with sex crimes in the independent sector these days.
An enormous amount, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think these independent films are making themselves as these edgy, pushing boundaries works. And it's very exciting, I think. Perhaps more exciting than mainstream. There's definitely an argument there. So that's the big thing I've noticed, definitely.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you there. It's a real shame what's going on with. There's still a lot of great films coming out in the mainstream sector in Korea, but it's true that there has been kind of a dip in quality. I don't know, but it's definitely a different style that the way they're being made. We don't have the same kind of dynamic, visionary directors. Not that they're not there, they're not afforded the same opportunity. From what I understand, the style of filmmaking is more kind of these ideas are hatched up kind of by committees now, as opposed to just kind of a visionary producer and director teaming up.
It's such a shame, isn't it?
It really is, yeah.
Yeah, because there is this wonderful quality in Korean movies, but they need a voice.
I know.
And it's a shame that a lot of these films these days do tend to mishmash a lot of different genres, but they are successful.
They've been doing that for a while, though. The mishmash has been going on for a spell. Certainly go back to some of my favorites, Save the Green Planet and The Host.
That was amazing, but unfortunately commercially not particularly successful.
Flop. Yeah, huge flop. You were talking about Asia Extreme earlier. That was the first Korean film I saw in the theater, was Save the Green Planet during the Asia Extreme Roadshow back in 2004.
Wow.
It is a real shame. Yet at the same time, these films are so incredibly successful. The industry has reached a peak. So who are we to say what's right or wrong?
That's true. Yeah. If we were in charge, our companies would lose a lot of money, I think.
Well, we'll see. There's hope yet. Let's talk about these interesting independent films. One of them that I know caught both our eyes recently at the Busan Film Festival was Lee Soo-jin's debut, Han Gong-ju, which has gone on to be incredibly successful. One of the most successful new Korean indies in years, certainly since Journalism Busan, I'd guess, having won the main awards at the Marrakesh and Rotterdam International Film Festivals, also at the Deauville Asian Film Festival, won a few awards there. It's going to Fribourg now, and it'll probably have some more glory in its future. It's doing really, really well. How would you account for its success?
It's a great film.
Plain and simple.
It is, yeah, short and simple. It is just such a powerful piece of filmmaking. Maybe it's a bit lofty praise, but I think Lee Soo-jin is like a raw Lee Chang-dong at this point in his career. It's a shame it's taken him, was it 4 or 5 years to make it? But you can see the quality and the love he's put into this film. It's just so vibrant on screen. But I think the reason that it's done so well is because it has this real emotional center around all of these social issues. And the social issues, they are very Korean, but some of them are translatable to other cultures too, and you can get this sense of alienation in culture. I don't want to talk too much about the plot because it's...
Yeah, it's a hard one to dance around because you don't want to spoil it.
Yeah, I don't want to. But I think the most hard-hitting moments of Korean cinema last year all came from Han Gong-ju for me. There were about 4 scenes that will stay with me for the rest of my life because they were so powerful and they just had this resonance. And when you finish watching the film, I mean, I was in a trance for a couple of days, still thinking about these issues that he was bringing up.
Yeah.
But the really sad thing is that these are based on true stories.
That's a shocking thing. Yeah, once you do know what the film is about, that's the saddest part. Yeah, I was in bits when I saw the film as well. It completely floored me.
Yeah. It's such a raw film, and it deals with such difficult subject matter, but it does it so eloquently. And with the knowledge that Lee Soo-jin has combined a few of these sort of controversial stories from the past into this whole, it's really shocking.
Yeah.
But he does the wonderful thing about the film is he doesn't focus entirely on this one social issue. He brings in a host of other issues like family, social prejudice, the way that age is very important in Korea, and then it gets exploited by people who are older as well. He just has this huge sort of social range and insight, and it's the kind of thing that you could do an entire thesis on. If you wanted to. There's so much to talk about. I'm very excited about his future.
Yeah, as am I. It's a very rich film, and obviously we were very taken with it. A number of festivals have been very taken with it. Of course, on the Marrakesh jury, we had people like Martin Scorsese and Marion Cotillard, which have been praising the film as well, and of course Korean media has picked up on that. But at the same time, a lot of people have responded quite differently to the film. Some people have actually really disliked it. They found, and again, it's hard to explain why, because without spoiling the film, but they found the film to be somewhat exploitative. What would you think about that?
Yeah, it's hard to see it from that perspective, to be honest. I don't think it was exploitative at all, because these are things that happened. And Lee Soo-jin didn't show these particular difficult scenes in any way that used his cast negatively. He didn't do it for shock value. These are things that are actually happened. If anything, he did it quite tastefully, I feel. So with any sort of drama, there is an intention to play on audience emotions. So in that sense, it is exploitative because it's trying to get an audience to empathise with characters and to feel something. But if you're going to criticise Han Gong-ju for that, you've got to criticise every drama ever produced. But I thought Lee Soo-jin did a very tasteful job of an extremely difficult subject matter, and I have nothing but praise for him, really.
Well, I would agree with you. And at the same time, I think I do understand where some people are coming from, and maybe particularly people who have daughters. Might be a slightly different reaction for them. But so this, of course, as you were mentioning earlier, is one of many works that have been dealing with sexual abuse in Korean cinema in the independent sector. Last year there was another similar film which dealt with the same issue, which was called Fatal. Interestingly, you mentioned comparisons comparing Lee Soo-jin to Lee Chang-dong. Some people were saying the same thing about the director Lee Dong-koo of Fatal for a year earlier at Busan. Other films like Don't Cry Mommy and Azuma are also dealing with these things. What do you make of this recent trend in independent Korean film?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a huge trend. There is a lot of films that deal with sexual abuse. And recently Hope or Wish, however you want to say it. Whichever title you prefer. Yeah, and there was the movie that was set in the school. The name escapes me. What was it? Crucible? That was one of the English titles.
Oh, Silenced.
Silenced, yeah. They had a couple of English titles, didn't they?
Yeah, they floated a few around before they settled on one.
Yeah, I think Silenced is a better title.
Yeah, it is a bit. When you think of the Crucible, you think of, Silence is better.
Yeah, Silence was one of the films that you can almost say it kickstarted it in mainstream sort of consciousness, almost. I mean, films did happen prior to that, but it's one of the first mainstream films that really kicked it.
Huge hits.
Into high gear.
And it got a huge amount of international press coverage, not to mention it stimulated judicial change in Korea.
That's so important.
Yeah.
It was quite a shock that these rules weren't law before the film.
Right.
That was quite a shock to a lot of the foreign community, I think.
Certainly. But to have a film kind of stimulate that kind of real world impact is quite rare and quite a huge event to happen.
Absolutely. But I think the reason that there is a lot of films these days dealing with sexual abuse is thanks to the media. You can't hide these stories anymore, thanks to the internet, thanks to press, Twitter, Facebook. When these stories occur, people know about it and it gets spread. You cannot put a lid on these kind of sexual abuse stories anymore. And these stories are so harrowing, heartbreaking, but at the same time inspirational, because somehow these people managed to overcome all of these adversities that they have faced. And it's incredible. So a lot of directors these days are getting inspiration from these stories. They want to create this kind of awareness because many years ago these things were hidden. Not just in Korea, every country in the world. Sexual abuse isn't sort of restricted to one nation. It's a global problem. And for years people have kept it quiet, but now you can't do that. New media is allowing people to understand what's going on, how terrible it is. And the filmmakers in Korea, again, mostly independent these days, they are saying, right, we want to show it. People deserve to know. And sometimes you'll get a real-life case like Han Gong-ju, which is heartbreaking, or like you mentioned, Ajuma. And the director for that film, he gave people a quite cathartic ending, which was quite nice. Nice but violent.
How to use a different word for it. I see your point.
Yeah, there's a lot of squirming going on when I saw that film, but at the same time, there was certainly a yes moment. But yeah, I honestly think new media is responsible for it. Because Korean society has evolved economically so fast since the end of the war, but culture takes much longer to evolve and to develop. So that's why the country is so well developed economically, but the culture is still very conservative, and issues of sex, sexual abuse, they're still taboo. But luckily we have new media, which is helping people to generate awareness. So there's this, again, this dichotomy between sort of conservatism and liberalism. What do we say? What don't we say? What can we show? But luckily we've got this vibrant independent sector that's saying, right, people need to know. So I think for me that's the reason. I don't know if you agree or disagree with that.
No, I do. I think it's very interesting with this is always something that's kind of I found interesting in Korea itself, where the industry, the film industry, is so advanced, so sophisticated, and that's one of the main points that drew me to it when I first started watching it. But of course, there's a lot of while Korea is a very developed country in many ways, there are certain social aspects of the country which lag behind other Western countries. And so again, it's this idea where social progress is much slower than economic progress, and so that's part of what makes this contrast is evident in Korea's cinema, and that's this kind of this tension exists in the cinema, where you have these incredibly well-made films and very attuned directors, and they're talking about things that are kind of very harsh, either directly or often metaphorically, and so you have this really interesting clash, and that's kind of what's made the kind of Korean cinema so explosive for me over the years. So, and certainly that's happening now in the independent sector a lot, and we're seeing it coming out in a lot of ways. So we love watching indies, Korean indies, but not everyone gets that opportunity. Because, of course, one of the difficult problems in a an industry that's developed so quickly is that you have in Korea a vertically integrated system, similar to that existed before the abolishment of the production code in Hollywood in the 1930s, which is where some companies have control all three sectors of the industry, and that's to say that the production, the distribution, and the exhibition. So companies will make films, they will distribute them and release them in their own theaters, and that leaves no space for almost no space for all these Korean indies that we're raving about. Is this a problem that you see being remedied in the industry here?
It's certainly a problem, but I don't see it being remedied, unfortunately. And again, it comes back to Korean society, Korean history, with the creation of the chaebols, like the big, powerful conglomerates that can own several different enterprises. And they're so powerful now that they can't be broken up. And it's the same thing with the film industry. They are so powerful, they own so much, that it's very difficult to break these companies up and the monopoly that they have. So it is quite difficult for these independents to come through and get their work screened. Luckily, however, Kim Ki-duk was quite vocal when he took an award for, I think it was Pieta, and he openly criticised all of the monopolies that were in existence, and it did send a wave through the industry. And since that time, I definitely noticed at my local theatres, they do dedicate one, sometimes two screens to independent films that are being released, which is wonderful. That one man can say something and suddenly these screens open up. It is possible. But the problem is awareness. These independent films, they don't have the budget for promotional material.
Certainly.
It is all word of mouth, which luckily in Korea, word of mouth is hugely powerful. I just wish it had a bit more in concerns with independent films. But yeah, it would be lovely if they would open up a couple more screens, get a bit more promotion. So yeah, it's a difficult one. There is a slow movement. So we're getting one or two screens a week, but beyond that, it's really hard to say.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a real shame. Just these days, I feel that most of the best Korean films are in the independent sector, and yet those are the ones that few people really get to see. Within the independent realm, there's also a lot of documentaries in Korea, and in recent years, that is kind of Korean documentaries have really started to explode. There's been some excellent ones in the last few months even, and they've been particularly dynamic films. I know that you've been keen on quite a few of these recent documentaries. Do you think there's something going on here on the nonfiction side of things?
Absolutely. Yeah, I had the fortune of interviewing the director of Manshin, Park Chan-kyung, recently. Lovely man, very, very articulate, very intelligent. And the thing that we discussed was the level of art that's being brought in to documentary making these days. Because sort of prior to this current sort of new wave almost that we were talking about, documentaries do tend to be very concerned with social issues.
Yeah.
As they should be. So people were getting a camera, they were documenting these social issues that are in need of change. However, what we're seeing at the moment is this sort of art aesthetic that's being employed, and it's making the documentaries so much more vibrant.
Yeah.
It's still got this powerful social message at the core, but there's all these other areas surrounding it. With Manshin, for example, Park Chan-kyung uses wonderful symbolism, like sort of finding a shoe in the ocean. So the idea of a shoe means to go, to travel, to leave. So he's bringing in this and these vibrant colours and sort of the shamanism that he's dealing with. He has these sort of the spirits walking around. And it's so interesting how he merges fictional and non-fictional accounts with talking head interviews and animated sequences. He's blending all these genres and it makes it so fascinating.
Yeah.
The other two documentaries that are really good these days are A Dream of Iron and Non-Fiction Diary. And interestingly enough, they're all connected.
They are indeed, yeah.
Yeah. So, the director of A Dream of Iron, what was his name again?
Kelvin Park Kyung-kun.
Yes, that's right. Him and Park Chan-kyung are friends. They've been friends for many years. and the director of Nonfiction Diary was Park Chan-kyung's student.
Indeed, yeah. It's really no wonder that they share kind of this aesthetic. It's been wonderful seeing what's happening in the Korean documentary scene. Up until a few years ago, while I'd seen a few Korean documentaries, forgive me for saying that they were just a bit dull. There was very, very important themes, important messages being told, but not in a very dynamic fashion.
Absolutely.
And so now we're seeing that. So I think it's great because people will be more interested in watching these films. So hopefully that means that there'll be more exciting things in the way, and they will eventually build a larger audience. So speaking of new films, are there any projects on the horizon that you're particularly excited about?
How far is your horizon? Well, it's hard to say because a lot of the films I'm excited about are very, very far away. Like Lee Chang-dong's new film, we're probably not going to see that anytime soon, I imagine. And it's a crime that man cannot get funding. It's really hard for him to get funding for his movie. He is absolutely legendary. He's a huge figure. He should be getting funding easily. But
I agree. He's a huge figure, and everyone respects Lee Chang-dong in the industry here. No question about it.
Oh, if I had money, I'd throw it at him. I'd give him some money. But I think his film is a year, possibly more away. So that's something I'm looking forward to. I think Jeon Do-yeon has recently signed for a new film. I'm not so sure on the specifics exactly, but I think that's quite far away too.
Well, she has there's the one Memories of Soar, which will be out later this year, and she's in talks to star in the new Lee Yoon-ki film.
That would be good
with Kim Yeon-suk. But they're only in the discussion stage. Kim Yeon-suk just signed on to a new film last week, so I don't know if that's impacted that decision.
I really hope Jeon Do-yeon works with Lee Yoon-ki. I love his sensitivity and grace that he has.
Yeah. Now, they worked together before, of course, in My Dear Enemy, and that was terrific. So it'd be great to see them work together again.
Yeah, that'd be nice. So I tend to follow the directors or the actors or actresses, like Lee Byung-hun's new movie. That should be interesting. He's doing a period piece again, I think.
This is the one with Jeon Do-yeon, Memories of the Sword.
Yeah,
also the young star Kim Go-eun.
Yeah, that would be amazing. 3 quality actors there. I think more recently, the film that's really piqued my interest is The Battle of Myeongryong.
Yes, that's they've retitled that. It's called Roaring Currents now in English.
I really hope they don't stick with that title.
Roaring Currents?
It sounds like an angry sea.
I understand what you mean, but it's easier to say than Battle of Myeongyang. I think that's going to be a little harder for foreign viewers.
That's true, yeah. But I'm quite a fan of Lee Sun-shin. I really like his story, and I've been waiting for a big screen adaptation. There's been some TV dramas and things like that, but Kim Han-min, he's proved he's very good with War of the Arrows. Yeah. So he knows how to command action sequences and adrenaline pumping action. He knows that. So I'm quite looking forward to seeing what Chae Min-sik does with the character.
Yeah, that seems like great casting.
Yeah.
Sounds very exciting. Yeah.
I think it'll be a big hit because Lee Sun-shin is a national hero. So.
Yeah, I wasn't really familiar with his story before, but of course I just knew about his the statue of his that's in Gwanghwamun, that famous statue.
He's got about 20 statues around Korea
at
various points. Yeah,
because I wouldn't have noticed. But yeah, that's a very exciting film. So then, going back a bit, can you tell us a little bit about some of your favorite Korean films of all time?
Well, it probably won't surprise you, but Poetry by Lee Chang-dong.
Sure.
Yeah, that's a really powerful film for me because the issues that it deals with are not just about sexual abuse, but they're also about the way parents try to pay off people to try and keep the situation quiet. And that was a huge cultural shock for me at the time. So that was huge impact on me personally. Anything by Lee Chang-dong tends to get my interest, really.
Yeah.
In terms of more mainstream, I really enjoy Kang Jae-gyu's films. Brotherhood, Taeguki Hweraminyo, I think it's pronounced.
Taeguki, Brotherhood of War. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. I thought that was incredible. I know it's melodrama. A lot of critics say it's too melodramatic, but at the end of the film I was in floods of tears. I thought it was so powerful and moving, and it definitely shed a light on something that I wasn't overly familiar with on a more personal level. So I guess those are the 2 big ones for me. But wow, yeah, I have to draw out a list, like the Vengeance trilogy, or you know, I remember seeing Kim Ji-yoon's A Bittersweet Life in England. There was an Asian film festival, and I went there with two of my friends, all film fanatics. We were the only 3 people in the cinema watching A Bittersweet Life. That movie is phenomenal.
Yeah,
it's a wonderful gangster piece. It's incredible. We were the only 3. And I remember thinking, this movie deserves a big audience, much more than the other sort of generic Hollywood films that just get pumped out every month. So yeah, that Bittersweet Life had a big impact on me. It made me thirsty for more. So, wow, I'm just going to list films all day. I think.
It's not very hard when you're talking about Korean cinema. Lots of great gems there.
There is, absolutely. And do you know, it's funny because I spoke to my dad last week, and he said to me, I saw this great Korean film. It was so good. And I can't remember the name. It's like, oh, okay, just tell me what happens in the story. And he said, well, there was this man, and he was locked away in a room for 13 years.
Okay.
And I thought, you've only just seen Old Boy? Old Boy is quite old now. You know, it's many, many years ago. But you know, these films, when people see them, they do get this reaction. Yeah, it's just that awareness, they're trying to generate it. So yeah, it's quite funny. Every time I meet people, I try to push these films. Say, you've got to watch this.
Yeah, I've been trying to do that for years, with varying levels of success. All right. Well, Simon, it's been a great pleasure talking with you. Thank you for coming out here. So thanks very much, and we hope to have you on again soon.
Oh, thank you very much.
For this week's Korean Film on Focus, I want to share a few words about the new film Intruders, which is currently on limited release in Korea. The film is the sophomore feature of director No Young-suk, who previously broke out onto the scene in 2008 with the very well-regarded indie film Daytime Drinking. That film went on to screen at many festivals, even earning a few awards, and this new feature debuted at the Toronto International Film Festival, before screening at a variety of other events, including, of course, the Busan International Film Festival. The film is a genre piece that takes place in the Gangwon province during winter, so that's in the mountainous part of Korea. A script writer decides to take some time out at a cabin, a cabin resort owned by a friend of his that is vacant. He goes there to try and finish his screenplay. On his way there on the bus, he meets an ex-convict who is very chatty and tries to be friends with him, and who kind of freaks him out a little bit on the bus. And while he's at the pension, various guests drop by, mostly guests, unwanted guests, and when he, after writing for a while, he leaves his room, and suddenly a dead body appears, and at that point things start to go a little haywire. So this is a very intriguing, atmospheric, well shot indie from No Young-suk. It's an interesting departure from his more character-driven debut. But it works very well as a genre piece, has a lot of interesting quirks, a bit of humor, and a surprise twist at the end, and quite a lot of tension derived from its strong lensing, strong cinematography, the use of the landscape and the snow and the nighttime photography. It all comes together quite well. And so that film is now on release in Korea, and that is our recommended film this week on Korean Cinema Today. So that is it for us this time around. Thank you very much for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed our interview with Simon McEnteggart. And be sure to find us again on iTunes by searching for Korean Cinema Today. So thank you for listening, and tune in again next time.